and welcome to China EVs and More, where my co-host Lei Xing, a Vegas Lei Xing, and I will go over the week's most important and interesting news coming out of the global EV, AV, and mobility sectors. What Lei and I discussed today is based on our opinions and should not be taken as investment advice. For those that are new to the show, welcome. And to our loyal listeners, welcome back. We ask that you please help us get the word out to other enthusiasts about this podcast. And of course, tune in again next week. My name is Tu Li. I am the Managing Director at Sinoauto Insights, a global management consultancy that helps organizations bring innovative and tech-focused products and services to the transportation and mobility sectors. I write a free weekly newsletter that we pull many of our discussion topics from. You can sign up for it at sinoautoinsights.com, which of course I encourage you all to do. Lei?
Yes, sir.
I have a feeling that this week is going to be a lot of you talking. So grab a bottle of water and please introduce yourself.
A very early good morning live from Las Vegas. And see,
you're just coming home from the clubs though, right? It's not like you're sleeping.
I think
right?
I just did. I sound like really...
Yeah, you just come home from the clubs, right?
Exactly.
Or the tables, tables. One of the two.
Well, both maybe. Good morning. This is your co-host, Lei Xing, former chief editor of China Auto Review. And this is episode number 149. And yes, I'm coming to you live from Las Vegas CES 2024. It's been, I don't know, I think this is the best CES I've had. This is my 7th time attending. And what can I say? A lot of walking, a lot of China factor. I had a lot of surprises. And I had tweeted that one takeaway is the word respect. And I'll explain why. But I mean, see, you skipped it. It's, you need to be here. I mean,
yeah, next year, for sure.
You cannot skip next year. You have to be here to kind of experience, I mean, Las Vegas in itself, right? And the reason why I'm saying respect is there's so many anecdotes. And one would be seeing Dr. Wu Xinzhou, the former head of autonomous driving expo, who is now with NVIDIA, at the Mercedes-Benz press conference. And, I'm pretty much was next to him and seeing him and going back to the very early, days when I first met him at the first 1024 Tech Day at Tsinghua University. And he said, my job was to for Xpeng to be number one in ADAS and while now the so-called City NOA features. And I think he's done it, right? With Xpeng now having 200 some cities of this XNGP feature.
Well, I think a few companies and people would argue that point with you, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I mean, and seeing him and Mercedes, they spoke highly of him. Now at NVIDIA, because...
Well, that's because Mercedes doesn't know what the hell they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. And now NVIDIA is such a crucial, ecosystem partner for them. And he has the knowledge in China. He went through that, developing these features. So it's good to see him. I mean, since last time I saw him was at that event 4 years ago. And the other thing I find out was how amazing these brand presentations, or maybe how the booths were presented. Some interesting companies that I did not expect to see, but they were here. 2 examples would be StarCharge, one of the leading charging operators in China. And the other one is Gendome. Do you know what Gendome is? Have you ever heard of that name?
I've heard of it. I forget. Yeah, I've heard of it.
What do you think?
I might have even met. Let me think. I forget. I'm pretty sure I met somebody from there.
Yeah, it's part of the Goshen's energy storage unit. Now it's branded Gendome. And so if you don't know that this is a Chinese company, Chinese brand, but the way the booth is set up, I was very impressed how now some of these companies and LiDARs, let's say RoboSense, Hertz, the customer-facing people at the booth are all Americans. You see that internationalization happen. Whereas, I mean, the first time attending 2016, I think RoboSense was here in 2017. And how far just the booth feel, like how they present themselves, was very impressive. I think that's a sign of times. And I was also very impressed by all the Korean companies. I mean, they just in terms of booth style, setup, Hyundai, Kia, Samsung, LG, Doosan, right? Hyundai Mobis. I think the Chinese can learn a lot from the Korean companies on how successful they've been, branding wise, marketing wise. That's my this initial impression, just seeing these booths. And then I mean the topic, the other big keyword is the generative AI and immersive experience display. Saw a lot of that, and 3 German companies that are here: Mercedes, Volkswagen, and BMW, all launched their roughly the same, voice based.
Well, this is where I got to stop you, Lay.
Yeah,
Because all these companies, because a couple comments about the China stuff, but I'll start with what you just said. I know you aren't into dunking on the German OEMs as much as I am, but they've always come to CES to build that tech cred, right?
I was just about to start dunking, and you stopped me.
Okay, go ahead.
They all had these generative AI, ChatGPT, voice, how you interact with the system through this chat. And I tried all of them. First of all, they're still under development, all the vehicles that they showed. So there were tons of bugs. And when the Volkswagen press conference, they had a bug. It was smooth, right? It's not fast, but it was smooth. But at the very end, the guy from, I think it was from Volkswagen, yes, in the car asked who makes the best cars. And the system responded with, you can see the text, who makes the best cases. And the Cerence guy, this is in collaboration with Cerence, stopped it right there because there was a bug. BMW, they're using Amazon, Alexa, and just tons of bugs. Mercedes, same. They had this little pod at the booth showing there's next MBOS and MBUX. There were some issues, and the first initial reaction was like, "What are these?" Because you and I have seen what is available in China of just voice recognition, right? So my feel is just that how China has influenced these foreign legacies, and they're trying hard to catch up. And you could see that how China is far ahead. That's what I want to say. Just one aspect of it.
Yeah, man, I'm going to be a cynic about technology and legacy OEMs until I see one of them kind of win on creating a great UX. So
yeah, and I mean the UX, and then I think this was a great CES for the Western people to really get to see a few of the latest and the greatest EV products from China. So I tweeted that this was the Geely kind of CES because indirectly they had the Zeekr 07 at the Valeo booth. They had the Geely Galaxy E8 at the BOE booth. BOE is a display company, Chinese company. They try to supply Biden. That was ahead of its times, but now the E8, Galaxy E8 had that A2A pillar screen. Neo, the ET7, but I mean, with the Xeon LiDAR booth. A few Polestars here and there at their partner booth. So no Chinese OEM or brand exhibited directly, but the two of the most talked about products at the end of 2023 made their way into CES. And sorry, I've been just talking so much, and just what I think of that come to mind is one anecdote was our good friend Abe. I met him for the finally, and we were going back to he was staying at New York, which is right across where I'm staying, on the monorail. And we met a couple of designers. Guess from who? From BYD. They're very young. And we talked about the Yangwang U8, which Abe said he had a sighting in Vegas. I didn't see it. So the BYD, I asked the BYD designers, and they said yes. They brought some Yangwang U8 over to the US, mostly for testing for localization, I guess. And I told him about the interior of that Yangwang U8 kind of, tool, right? And he, it was so funny. Like, he covered his badge and said, now we're talking look at me as not someone from BYD. And he just said, like, a lot of decisions that the designers don't make. Like those type of conversations was really interesting. And just people, I guess, the CES, I met a lot of people that I wouldn't have met, even in China, because they come over here to learn, even for the ones that are not exhibiting. Xiaopeng was here, He Xiaopeng was here, Brian Gu was here. I sent you a photo at the Aero HT booth, right?
They have to come, though. Companies like that, guys like that, just because they're U.S. traded.
Yeah.
So
I met the former CEO of Yidao Yongche, which started, I think, one of the first ride-hailing companies before Didi. Zhou Hang, you've heard of his name?
Mm-hmm.
He's now an investor. And I told him about, the saga of Latifi and his company. Just chance encounters with the people that are in this industry and who've I met before, but I would never imagine meeting them, even in China. But they're here. And yeah, it's just like, just a lot of walking around, because it's always a huge venue. The West Hall, the North Hall, Central Hall. And yeah.
So I look at these people coming not only out of curiosity and trying to understand Western markets, but because there's what's the right way to say this? There's a need to expand internationally because they can't rely on the China market for growth anymore. The current situation for them, where the Chinese economy is a bit stagnant, struggling a little bit, I think that creates that pressure. And I also think there's a level of confidence in products and innovation and being able to compete. And so yeah, I think it's great. And it's unfortunate that I wasn't able to go. I'm sure I would have had a ton of fun, but seeing it from afar, yeah, it did seem like there were some interesting companies that were there that I wouldn't have thought were going to be there. So
yeah, same here. Like, you stumble upon these companies that okay, all right, well, I know they're this company, but the way they're presented for people that might not know, that they don't feel like Chinese brand, they don't feel like Chinese company. They feel very globalized. That's what I was saying. And one also the LiDAR. So if you attended CES for a number of times, you can sort of see, you get to see the trends. So last year, there were at least, I don't know, more than a dozen LiDAR companies in the West Hall alone. And this year, some were not there, or some moved to the north and the other halls. And some probably will not be continuing in the automotive ADAS business, because now the top three Chinese LiDAR companies, Hesai, RoboSense, and Innovision, now Xi'an, that's their new name, they are at the front. They're at the forefront of delivering large volumes of LiDARs. And the three of them, I expect them to do 1 million LiDARs this year, based on their trajectory, based on their momentum. And the second tiers, the third tiers, you can sort of see, the companies like, Septon wasn't here. I think there was someone we interviewed, the CEO. Who else? Ouster wasn't here. And some of the other Chinese smaller players, they moved away from automotive ADAS. So you kind of see, who the leading players are. They're going to get bigger. They're going to get more business. So I think probably before the year's out, if not before the mid-year, you will start to see announcements of Chinese LiDARs getting onto international OEMs. Hesai already announced something, but they hadn't said who the international OEM was. So that's a trend right there. And they're starting to separate themselves from the rest of the pack. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, to me, LiDAR is going to be commoditized in the next 5 years. I just Hesai, Innovision, and RoboSense are just going to beat each other up. From a volume standpoint, the lion's share is still in the China market, and I don't know. I think that if LiDAR becomes cheap enough, it's going to be used as an alternate sensor for redundancy. But I think there's going to be new technologies that emerge, or companies are going to start going away from LiDAR and use camera only. They're already starting to do that, right? So it's an interesting space, because what I think in 2024 and beyond is going to happen is we're going to start seeing a bit more scrutiny on the data that's being captured, where it's stored, who has access to it. And so it puts the OEMs, whether you're European, American, Japanese, or Korean, in a weird situation, because as much as Hesai and these guys open offices, they have offices in California. I think a couple of them have offices in Detroit or around Detroit. This is the crazy thing, right? I think a lot of politicians just pull out the broadest brush they can and say, okay, this is a Chinese company. It could be an Asian founder, maybe not even Chinese. And then a stupid politician is going to be like, oh man, that's got to be a Chinese company, or, whatever. So there needs to be, I think, a better understanding of that stuff from the US government, from the EU, before in 2024. And this, it's just going to be really difficult. And so I almost feel this new wave of visitors to CES in 2024 is a wait and see to see what happens with the US election, with any tariffs that are coming out of the EU perhaps later this year. And because I believe they're fully committed to the US market. Whether the US government is going to allow them to compete freely is another question.
Yeah, just in terms of crowd, just comparing to last year, the Chinese factor, the Chinese that are coming to CES, it was at least twice, just pure volume-wise, people coming. I think one reason was that at the end of 2022, when China opened up, and turning the year to CES 2023, the US had required people from China to take a test to come into the US. I think that affected participation a little bit. But man, this year, a lot more Chinese, I think, not only companies, but Chinese people, they came over, either exhibiting or visiting just to check things out. Presence is a lot more than just last year.
And the one thing that I think is worth pointing out is that when we were in Shanghai, we noticed a lot of European executives at the Shanghai Auto Show. There weren't a lot of Americans that I noticed that visited. There were some, but it was dominated by the European executives and European visitors. So double down on your point. This is a lot of Americans' first opportunity to see Chinese tech up close, see Chinese EVs up close. And so I would think that a lot of the American companies that are trying to compete in the LiDAR space, the battery space, quite a few of them are going to walk away from CES today, tomorrow, Sunday, kind of intimidated a bit, because they're going to look from a spec sheet standpoint to see whether or not their products or their product roadmap can compete. And then they're going to freak out because of the prices that Hesai is rumored to be selling X LiDAR or Y LiDAR at to this foreign OEM or this international OEM. So the American in me wants this to be a wake-up call, because it was a wake-up call for the Europeans. The Shanghai Auto Show was a wake-up call for the Europeans. Now, whether they can do anything about it is another question. But
and who's doing about it is the question. Right?
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, right? Because if you're not even aware if you're not even aware of it, then you're not concerned about it. But now that it's in your face and in your backyard, now you better reassess your strategy, make sure that you're moving fast, you're kind of managing costs, but pushing the innovation for your products. And automotive sector has just notoriously been known to be conservative, and now is not the time to be conservative. So, and I had a couple chats this week, and one of the reasons I couldn't go was because I had a couple important meetings. And what I can disclose about one of these important meetings is that I was talking to some organizations, let's just call them some organizations, and I think I freaked one or two of them out because I said, we're literally not going to see some American companies in the next 10 years that we've known for the last 60, 70, 80 years. And I gave them a lot more detail and showed them pictures, gave them, and I walked away thinking that they still don't get it. Because my job wasn't to try to freak them out or create fear. It was to give them a reality check.
Yeah, Luminar people, I talked to them again, and I just told them, you're not going to compete in China. That's face the reality of, just on the LiDAR space. Just too cutthroat. And I mean, Tesla cutting prices.
Oh my God, yeah. So you and I knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, this is non-CES stuff, but I lost track of what happened. But I think back in China, but the only thing I thought of was, Tesla again cutting prices, and then those huge numbers, final tally announced by CAAM, way more than what you and I probably expected of an EV sales, of vehicle sales.
So let's do this, because I was tracking a little bit. Let's look at my newsletter I just sent out. So some of the highlights, things that I would have wanted to see, the Zeekr 007. Let me ask you what your thoughts on that was. Is it about the size of a Model S? A little bit smaller?
No, I mean, I'd say it's a B sedan.
Okay.
So
it's like a 5 Series.
Maybe a little bit smaller, but the 007 and the E8 are competing with each other. I'll just say that. Full stop.
And so it wasn't enough because BYD also launched the U7, which is the luxury.
So there were some Geely people at the BOE booth. So there's this young guy who works at one of the, I guess, the research institute. I told him the Geely is now having a lot of models within the umbrella that are competing with themselves. But I think that the thing that the Zeekr that was shown in Valio with that light band customization, right? You just write whatever you want on the touch screen. Let's say hello Xing, hello Tu, and it'll appear on the light band. So I mean, these kind of things. And I heard that this came out because Valio's CEO visited China, I think in September, and An Conghui, when they met him, they just came up with this idea. And this was just a few months, and it made it happen. That's what I heard from Valio.
That's one of those things that you'll use for like 2 times, and then you'll not use it again.
I mean, it's trying to be different, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, other than that, just the vehicles themselves, the design, the fit and finish, the interior, the quality, I think it opened up a lot of eyes. And there was a Aston Martin. Was it the SUV? What's the model?
DB, I know what you're talking about.
Was it X7 DB X7 or something? Right next to the Geely E8. Nobody's looking at that one. Everybody's looking at the E8. Yeah.
So I've already gotten a few pings from people that left CES and wanted to get a download on X, Y company, Y product. And so I'm going to circle back with you offline, Lei, because there could be some projects we could work on.
Sure. I mean, and then one more I'll add is a lot of these tier ones, so the Valios, Forvias, Contis, and these companies, they're now exhibiting many products designed entirely by their China teams, because China is now such an influence on our innovations, on what's happening HMI-wise, a lot of influence on their global kind of let's say, displays innovative technology on displays, like in Fovea. A lot of it is China developed. So
that's why, so one of our core beliefs is that innovation is now moving east to west. And so when you have that level of competition, it really pushes innovation because it forces companies to take bigger risks. And so that's why we're seeing these things start in China and get showcased in the West. But let me see.
WeRide. I took a ride in the WeRide. Yeah, the Robobus. They had to have a safety driver sitting behind. They put a wheel, kind of a makeshift.
So they still had a steering wheel.
Yeah, they put a wheel and brake and accelerator pedals. I think that was retrofitted to. I think there was a requirement for this demo, but the guy was just sitting there and ready to take over any time. But I mean, that's it. But it was an L4.
So they didn't want to get in trouble like Auto X, I guess.
I guess. But I mean, yeah, it was. They are the only company that are running commercial operations of this type of robobus in China and globally, for that matter. I mean, I thought.
Well, they have a pretty substantial partnership with Yutong, right? So.
Yeah, and I mean, by now the Cruise Origin should have been on the road already, right? And the Cruise Origin was announced right before the pandemic in January 2020. Now it's been 4 years, and Cruise is kind of right. We all know.
I remember exchanging tweets with one of the current or ex comms people, and he was like, "Well, Cruise came out with this," and I was like, "We'll see who ends up on the roads earlier." So,
Zeekr, WeRide, Lotus. Lotus wasn't here. They show some robotic stuff, but these three companies are IPOing.
Yeah, that's going to be tough. But let me ask you, Lei, the one thing that maybe you can give us a history lesson, because GM sold 2.1 million vehicles.
Oh, that was a topic quite often talking to people, especially Americans.
So to give the listeners some context, GM sold 4 million vehicles as late as 2017 in the China market. Now that's going to be Chevy. So SAIC, their major partner. It's mostly through them, but Chevy, Buick, Cadillac, 4 million, mostly Buicks. And you tell me if I'm wrong. 2023, they booked 2.1 million vehicles. So if we're doing math, they've lost 50% of sales in 6 years. So can you maybe just give us a 30, 40-second synopsis of, okay, these were the companies or the brands that built GM up? Why were they so popular? Because we kind of know why they're losing sales, because it's similar to what's happening with Volkswagen. But what I want to emphasize is that losing 1.9 million, effectively 2 million, that if we're looking at annual capacity of 300,000, that's 7 factories that they've lost worth of sales in China. So,
I mean, so this is, I think, for the first time since 2009, maybe, that GM's US sales exceeded those of China. So that's number one, and obviously the 50% drop. But Buick, right? I remember they probably did close to 1 million, if not more, this one brand alone in China. And Buick has always been, of those years since 2009, the biggest market was in China. And of those 2 million, the caveat is that SGM Wuling was over 1.2 million units. But GM will count those sales. Although the brands, the Wuling and the Baojun, you can say they're GM brands, but they're Chinese brands. So in effect, the rest are the Chevrolet, Buicks, and Cadillacs. And I mean, it's crazy to see how
how fast this changed. And so if you're in the boardrooms, if you're part of management, 4 million units on a base of, in 2017, we're probably at 23, 24 million cars. Think of that. I mean, they had almost 20% market share. So, and this is why I think, for me, 3-4 years ago, 4 or 5 years, when you and I really started kind of talking, hanging out and stuff, it was already happening. I saw it happening, and I think some people thought I was crying wolf, in my newsletter, because I saw this 3, 4, 5 years ago.
Yeah, this is not because of the pandemic. This was happening before the pandemic.
Exactly. So, but when I was writing my newsletter in 2018 and 2019, early part of 2019, before COVID in China, I was getting pushback saying, this is not a huge deal, And I was like, yeah, it is. Now you see why I was making a fuss. So, and then you look at US, so this year was the first year since 2009 that GM sold more vehicles in the US than it did in China. And so if you're an American employee at GM who doesn't pay attention to their international operations, you think that GM did really well. So like, it's almost like one arm, you're working out and it's huge, right? It's like pumped. And then the other arm is like bleeding, GM is an international company. Volkswagen's an international company. And the realization needs to be that without the China market, they're basically a regional company. So
I was just about to say that two of the big three in the US, GM and Ford, they're about to become a lot more Americanized, following your regionalization comment. Because really, GM and Ford, all their profits are coming out of North America. And GM is really a US and China company, if you look at the volumes. Ford is really, I haven't seen the Ford numbers yet in China, but Ford is a US company. And Stellantis is more US plus Europe and maybe some other parts of the world. But
so sales volume, they're European, but Stellantis, the lion's share of their profits comes from the US. So
quite surprising that the ABBs did still pretty well. The 800,000, 765 for Mercedes, over 700,000 for Audi. So
I think, but honestly, BMW is probably the only one that can point to any positive movement on the clean energy vehicles that they're selling. So
yeah, this mostly because of the pricing strategy of the I models.
Yeah, how they reconciled it, because they priced it really, really high. And one other thing, since I wrote the newsletter, there are 20.4 million vehicles on NEVs on Chinese roads right now. So I think, and I'm guessing here, but I'm estimating there are about 1.7 million in the United States. Or sorry, there are about 2.5 million total in the United States. So almost a 90% difference. And of those 2.4 million, about 1.7 are Teslas in the US.
Yeah, the bulk of it are Teslas.
And then there were there were 3.83 million vehicles exported, passenger vehicles exported from China, almost 5 million if you include the commercial vehicles, okay? And then you and I think it's about a third of those are clean energy vehicles, right? And then BYD and Tesla are the largest exporters of clean energy vehicles. BYD exports almost a 4-to-1 ratio of BEVs to PHEVs. I think that number is going to balance out a little bit more in 2024 and beyond, because we're seeing a bit more demand for PHEVs lately. And so, oh man. And then Q4, the take rate hit 39.5% in China. I think the United States was a little over 10%. So I tweeted, so this is what I wrote in the newsletter. That was so 40%, well, 39.5 to be exact. That was the official take rate for NEVs in China in Q4. See what perseverance, a stack of cash or a stack of Rambos and a bunch of brands creating the fiercest competition on the planet can do. So, and for those that still aren't piecing it together, demand. All right. But I posted a Car News China chart, and BYD is the number one for December. Volkswagen is number two. okay, for the top selling brands.
Well, for the full year, BYD was number one over Volkswagen brand for the full year. This was first time ever. I think 2022, it was Volkswagen was 2.4 million in China, and BYD was 1.86, right? So last year they surpassed Volkswagen, single brand. And then starting off the year, if I remember, the three big news was, so Tesla cutting prices again yesterday on the 3 and Y. The Leap Motor launched the C10, or I guess they revealed the C10 at the 150,000 RMB point with LiDAR.
So 21,000, basically.
And then was it Hyper that announced lifetime free charging?
Yes.
For if you buy the vehicles before March, end of March. So different ways of.
And now on top of that, Tesla has cut price on 3 and Y.
Yeah. And they just launched the new 3 in the US, right?
Oh man, I haven't talked to you this week. So guess what I'm looking at buying for a car?
What?
A used Tesla.
From Hertz?
From Hertz.
Are you serious?
You can get one for like 20 grand.
Less than 20 grand. Yeah. Even my family, my sister was, talking to me about it. Like,
so I talked to Ilun, and he said,
good deals.
Yeah, he said it's I pinged him. I was like, hey, is it legit? And he was like, yeah, I would just get a new set of tires and you should be good. So I'm seriously considering it. So for those that are wondering, Hertz, I want to say,
I'm a big fan of Hertz,
has decided to sell a third of their clean energy vehicles. And basically they decided to sell a third of their Teslas. And they're posted on a Hertz buy. I forget what the site is called, but you can find it on Twitter. It's not that difficult to find. And they have some Teslas on sale. So to add insult to injury, Tesla cuts price in China. It's getting hosed because the residuals on the 3s and the Ys due to these Hertz fire sale is going to be nasty in the United States, I would think. But I look at it like it could be a daily driver that I don't take to long trips. And I would imagine on eBay, there's a ton of parts on the secondary market if I needed to change an interior part or even replace a seat. I think there has to be a pretty robust market for that stuff. Yeah. So anyways, that's pretty much all I had.
Yeah. Do you know if you still get the credit for buying a used Tesla from Hertz or no?
I think you do. I think you do. That's the one thing I was going to take a little bit of time today to figure out, because if you buy a used car, the United States government, or we as in U.S. taxpayers, we will help you with a $4,500 credit, I think, or $4,000 credit, one of the two.
Yeah. Okay.
And not only that, the last thing I'll talk about Tesla is that they recalled 1.6 million vehicles, but they didn't really recall because it's an OTA update.
Yeah.
Oh no, the last thing I'll say is BYD has a boat that ships 7,000 vehicles. Could you imagine the size of this freaking boat, man?
BYD has a boat and it has a boat. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So anyways, hey, we'll be back to our normal covering what's going on with the Chinese and global mobility sectors next week. Lei will be well rested. He won't be coming home from Gray's doing a podcast.
I'm catching a flight like right after this. So yeah.
Okay. Hey everyone, I have some homework for you. Please watch my Lions win their playoff game on Sunday.
All right. Go Lions.
Woo-hoo. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We'll talk with you next week.
Same here. Thank you all. Bye-bye.
That brings us to the end of this week's show. Lei and I thank you for tuning in. My name is Tu Lee, and you can find me on Twitter at Sino Auto Insight. That's SinoAutoInsight. You can find Lei on Twitter at LeiXing77. That's LEIXING77. If you wouldn't mind rating and or reviewing us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you grab your podcast from, we'd appreciate that as well. Even better, if you enjoy this show, please tell your friends about it. Please join us again next week as we track down all the latest news on China, EVs, and more.